everyone, it's Marissa. I wanted to share today my buyer guidelines. So this is everything your buyer's agent would want you to know. And a buyer's agent is the person who works on the buying side of the transaction. So I'm hoping that your buyer's agent has something like this. Ideally, I would love if you would work with me as your buyer's agent, but if not, I'm really hoping that they have something like this. Your buyer's agent should be educating you on all of their rules and guidelines that they have for the transaction. There is no way that you are going to know some of these things because us as real estate agents, it is our job to go through transactions, and we go through a lot more than you go through. You might be going through one every 3 years, every 5 years, every 10 years. So we treat it like it's something new every single time, and we cannot expect you to know these things. So for all my real estate agents out there, you need to get on this if you haven't yet. You need to be sending your buyers a buyer guidelines, buyer rules before you start the transaction. Even just sitting down at a buyer consultation and explaining how you work is a good way to get started, but I love to have everything in writing. So I have my buyer guidelines. I took a lot from Hustle Humbly, this real estate podcast that I listen to, and then I've added my own based on what I have experienced in the past and things that I feel the need to put them out front before we start the transaction. So I'm excited to share my list with you. So rule number 1 is avoid any major employment or financial changes during the time of your transaction. You should really kind of avoid them even before you get under contract, but especially when you're under contract. Your lender can update things like if you get a raise, they can update that on your pre-approval pretty easily beforehand. And then if you say quit your job in the middle of the transaction, that's going to be an issue. So a lot of lenders should tell you these rules up front, but if they don't, I'm telling you them now. It can affect your ability to secure your loan. Examples of this can include large purchases such as a new car or furniture. So if you're under contract and you're like, I really want this furniture set for the new house, and you go and drop a couple grand on it while you're under contract and not yet closed on your new house, you might run into some issues. So just hold off on any big purchases. Quitting or changing jobs or changing your marital status, just don't do any major life changes during the transaction. Rule number 2 is relating to for sale by owner. So we as agents can help you with for sale by owner properties, but we need to go about this in the correct way to make sure that everything runs smoothly. So you can always bring your agent to things if you're unsure. I would actually rather be there at the walkthrough for sale by owner or open houses, things like that. So always ask your agent if they can come along. If they say no, there's probably something fishy going on there. They should want to be there because it is in everyone's best interest. So if you do find a for sale by owner property or any property that you're interested in that is not on the market, please send me the property address. I will get everything coordinated. If you have any phone numbers, contact information for the sellers, that's helpful as well, so that I can reach out and we can head there together. And just so I can advise you not to talk about price, not to talk about what you're gonna put in your offer, because that can be very misleading if you say that up front to the seller and then you go back on your word and submit something that's 10 grand lower. They might be a little upset with you. So we try to keep it really, really bland. If the seller, for whatever reason, is at showings as well, even if the house is on the market, I always tell my buyers to just not give any insight on if they like the house. If they did not, just say that you're thinking about it. And also to never ever discuss terms of an offer verbally with the seller. We're always going to put that in writing, and we are always going to try to negotiate in our client's best interest. Okay, moving on to number 3. Most appointments require notice. So if we find out that 20 minutes beforehand we want to see this house, we might not be able to accommodate that. We have to keep in mind that sellers may be living in these houses and they may have to arrange for kids and pets and cleaning up their house before the showing. Ideally, I personally like to have about 12 hours notice, but if it is kind of a quick market and things are short notice, just send me the property address and we will see what we can do. But just be aware that most appointments do require some notice. Along with that, we need to stick to our appointment time as best as we possibly can. So if our showing is for 12 to 12:30, we should do our best to be there a couple minutes before 12 so that we can get in the property on time. If we show up late, it might be too late. It kind of goes along with my last guideline where we need to give notice. We can't keep pushing it back and giving no notice at all. So just keep in mind that if you are running late, we might not be able to reschedule the appointment. We might still only have until 12:30. So if we get in there at 12:10 and we are there until 12:30 and you feel like you don't have enough time to look at the house, we may have to come back because the sellers are counting on that time to be away from their house and they might need to be back in time for something else. They may have confirmed our appointment because they know that they got to get home right after and leave for something at 1 and they have to grab something from the house, for example. We also do this to respect other buyers' time and their privacy at showings. If the listing agent has not allowed overlapping showings and it's one appointment at a time, we do not want to run over or run before our time. And that's another thing. If we're showing up 10 minutes before the showing, we might have to just hang out in the car. We might have to chat outside for a little bit. I try to go in as close to the appointment time as possible because we want to respect others' time and privacy. Next guideline is that all individuals who are involved in the purchase decision should ideally be at all appointments. So this includes showings, this includes inspections, etc. We welcome parents at inspections, but we want them to make sure that they have been at showings prior so that they know how this house stacks up to the rest. This might be the best house we've seen, but if they haven't seen the other showings, they might not understand that. So this might be the best house for your price range. We want to make sure that they have all the necessary information before giving you advice on your purchase decision. Next guideline is do not view properties with the listing agent or another agent if we have a signed buyer agency agreement. So in most states, I believe that there is a buyer agency agreement or something along those lines that states that this buyer's agent is going to be working for this buyer. They owe them client duties. So this is not just like a customer. We have a difference between a customer and a client. So a customer is just kind of the general public that we're helping out, but we can't really give them too much advice. Once this person becomes our client by signing the buyer agency agreement, we owe them all of the duties. We are able to help them negotiate. We are able to give them the advice. So it is always ideal to have them as a client. It's kind of dependent on the agent where you're going to be signing this buyer agency agreement within the transaction. But if you do have a signed buyer agency agreement with another agent, or say with me as your agent, you need to disclose that to others, and you need to make sure that you stick with your one agent throughout the entire process. If something comes up and you do have a disagreement and you no longer want to be working with that agent, you need to have a conversation with them and you can mutually terminate that agreement. It is not like, you know, signed and done, like 6 months of working with them. You have to stick with them for the 6 months. You can decide to go your separate ways and work with a new agent, but be careful because if you have a signed buyer agency agreement, let's say with Amy over here, Amy the agent, and then you go over to Andy the agent, and you start working with Andy and you buy a house with Andy, you may owe some commission back to Amy. If you decided you didn't want to work with Amy anymore and you terminated your agreement and then moved on to Andy, bought a house with Andy, you'd be good to go. So just make sure that you disclose that and make sure that you do not have a signed buyer agency agreement and are working with another agent. Also kind of goes along with the listing agent things is that the reason we don't really want you working with the listing agent is because they work for the seller. They are keeping the seller's best interests at heart, and that is how they are negotiating and writing your offer and disclosing information. So it is always great to have a buyer's agent on your side because our job is to advocate for your best interests. All right, next thing is in regards to your search. So your agent, this will be different across the board. A lot of agents do things differently, and that's okay, but personally I set up an email search for my buyers, and it gets pulled directly from MLS based on their criteria and shoots them out listings as soon as they go live. So this is going to be your most accurate representation of what's out there on the market that matches your criteria. There may be a couple of odd instances where the radius we have drawn, for example, there's a house right outside the radius that's not showing up in your search, but you find it on Zillow. Great, send me the address. I am more than happy to look it up, see if it's available, see all the information on it. But this email search is going to be your closest and best idea of the properties that are on the market. If we go to Zillow and we go to realtor.com, we may find properties that have already sold. They may be under contract, but they're still showing up. I do believe realtor.com has gotten a little more advanced with this, where they show that the property is contingent, for example, but as far as I know, Zillow has not done that yet. So you could get a notification, and that's another thing. Even if you get a notification, let's say right now I get a notification that there's a house in Appleton for sale. I go and I look at it on Zillow. I'm like, oh my God, it's so cute. I'm in love with it. I text my real estate agent, hey, I want to see this house. They look it up, it's already under contract. Zillow just kind of sends you all these random listings that may match your criteria. They're not really sending you notifications as these listings go live. So, like I said before, I always welcome my buyers to send me things that they find on realtor.com and Zillow, but I want them to know in the back of their mind that these may already be under contract. I want them to be aware of that. I want them to be looking at their email search as much as possible compared to looking at Zillow and realtor.com to find houses. Just more reliable. The next thing I ask is that if you go to open houses or model homes, you at least tell the agent or the representative there, hey, I'm working with Marissa Miller from Think Hallmark Real Estate. She's my buyer's agent. Tell them that when you go to sign in at an open house, you're going to put your name and you're going to say Marissa Miller is my buyer's agent, or Marissa Miller is my real estate agent. You know, that's all you need to say. Marissa Miller is my agent. But I can also always go along to these, and I would much prefer that. So we can treat it almost like a showing, and I am always willing to go along with you. Just be careful of going into an open house or a model home and not disclosing that you have agency, because if you do that, you might end up writing an offer with the listing agent and they might represent you, and you might not even realize that. And same with the model homes, you might not even realize that they are really representing their own best interests and just trying to get you in there. So like I said, kind of with my other point earlier, it's always best to have a buyer's agent on your side. They're advocating for your best interests. Okay, this next one has actually happened to me a couple of times, and it's like, as much as I try to avoid it, I can't always. I can just control what we do on our end. So sometimes the seller knows my buyers and the seller reaches out directly to my buyers, texting them, calling them about the property. And I have to advise my buyers to please not talk to them, because like I said earlier, if we're disclosing verbal, even written through text promises or things about the transaction, first of all, both of our agents are out of the loop. There are things going on behind the scenes that we can no longer control necessarily, and those might cause huge hiccups in the transaction. So we do not want to be talking to the seller directly. As a buyer, the way that you can handle this, and I would encourage all listing agents as well to talk to their sellers and tell them not to reach out to the buyers directly. It's just not in anyone's best interest, really. So I would tell your sellers that, but then as a buyer, if you have a seller who is reaching out to you and there's nothing you can do about it, they've texted you, you haven't seeked them out at all, they've just reached out to you, I would advise to just say, hey, that's great. If you could just actually talk to my agent about that, that would be great. And just give them my contact information. So if they say, hey, you know, like we are fixing that roof and, you know, that's no big deal, or yeah, we're gonna be willing to come down to $200,000. just say, hey, that's great. Well, can you just relay that to my agent? That would be fantastic. If they don't want to have their agent reach out to me for some reason, which honestly that would be the best way. But if they want to reach out to me directly, that's much better than them reaching out to my buyer directly, because things can get very misconstrued. So that would be my advice. So if a seller is reaching out to you and talking about terms of the transaction, I would really advise to just send them my way. Feel free to send them my contact information, and then just do your best not to respond in any other way, giving any details of the transaction away. Next guideline is to note that sellers still own their property and they can still do whatever the heck they want in their house, even when it's listed on the market. So that includes having recording devices in their home. This might be a camera, it might be a microphone. Just please be aware that when you are walking into a showing, nothing is really private. Even though you're behind closed doors, you never really know what the sellers have set up. So we're not going to talk about negotiations in the home, and we're not going to, discuss any things that, oh my gosh, these curtains are so ugly. Like, we're not going to say that, because that will definitely take away our negotiating power. Sellers are very emotional, and they see that, and then they get your offer in and they say, no, I don't want to sell it to these people because they said my curtains were ugly. So let's just go in there. It's okay to talk about what you like and what you don't like, if it's like, the floor plan or things that don't reflect on their personal taste. But once we start making comments that could be potentially hurtful to the sellers and we talk about negotiations, that's when things get a little bit dicey. And a lot of people have, those Ring doorbells or something like that on their front door. So we want to really be careful about what we're saying, even outside of the house. We don't really want to talk about negotiations at the house at all. We can talk about them in the car on the way home. We can talk about them on the phone later once we get home. But we really don't want to discuss it too much in depth while we're at the house, because you never know what's going on. I've heard stories about people going and taking pictures in front of the house at their showing and being like, this is my future house. And we just have to think about that is going to take all of our negotiating power away, because the seller sees how desperate we are and sees how much we love the house. We just have to realize that the sellers are gonna see that, and that they are gonna come get us for all we got. They are not gonna probably play nice, because they realize that you're kind of in a desperate situation. So we wanna keep things as black and white as possible. We wanna just submit our offer in writing. We wanna say, hey, I'm interested in this house. These are my terms of my offer. And then if they wanna come back and counter, great. We can handle that on our own. It's always good to have kind of that middleman and be very stoic and blank face. We don't wanna give anything away. So yes, just be careful about what you're saying in the home. If you have any parents, significant others, or friends coming along, make sure, and I will also do my best to relay that message to them as well. And last but not least, I have avoid sharing details about the transaction on social media. So you might think, I just got an accepted offer on my house, and I'm so excited, and so I'm gonna go screenshot this house. It's realtor.com listing, for example, and I am gonna go post that on Facebook and say, oh my god, we got a house, so fun. But we have so much to get through. The accepted offer is just the first part of everything. We have so much to do when we're under contract. We may have inspections that we don't make it through. We might have issues with other things. We might have issues with financing. We don't really want to put the address out there and put our names and attach it to it until it's closed and final. We just don't want to put any of that information out there. If you've taken a peek at my social media, you will notice that I only post accepted offers for listings, and I put the picture in there. I like to keep my buyers' information very secretive. I don't even say their names when we have an accepted offer. I might say like they got an accepted offer on some land or some property in Appleton, that really tells them nothing yet. So we want to be careful about what we're posting on social media. All right, that's all I have for now. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am hoping to have a seller guidelines list that I can share eventually with you, but I hope this is helpful for all of those buyers out there, and I hope as well for all of the agents, and has given you some new ideas of things to make your transaction go a little bit smoother. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. My Instagram is @soldwithmarissa, and so is my Facebook. My YouTube channel is just Sold with Marissa, or you can email me at marissa@thinkhallmark.com. All right, until next time, see ya.